You ain't never met a woman like me, dripping in power, dripping in queen. Every step I take, the world gotta pause, cause when I walk in, I rewrite the laws. I got gold in my skin, got fire in my soul. Move like a goddess, yeah, that's how I roll. From my hips to my crown, I don't break, I don't bend. They try to copy, but they can't comprehend. I built empires, I birthed kings. Walk through the storm, still do big things. They love my curves, they love my stance. They love my magic, it's a whole romance. You can never. I don't chase, I don't fold, I don't bow, I don't break. You can try, you can watch, but you'll never take my place. Stamp that. I'm a phenomenal black woman, built from the best. Walk with grace, move with finesse. Drip like diamond, shine like gold. If you didn't know, baby, now you know. I'm a phenomenal black woman, top tier, unmatched. When I step in, the whole world reacts. Ain't no stopping, ain't no doubt. Beeping that's word of mouth. We've been it, they just catching up. Every shade, every hue, every tone. Melanin rich, built straight from the throne. They try to mimic, but they lack the shine. Cause what we got, it's one of a kind. Ain't no struggle that could break my stride. Ain't no limits when I set my sights. I take up space, I own my name. If you forgot, let me say it again. Oh, they heard you now. Black like honey, sweet but strong. Black like magic, been here all along. Black like history, black like grace. Black like power, you can't erase. Give them chills, bestie. Make it louder, make it bigger. I'm a phenomenal black woman, built from the best. Walk with grace, move with finesse. Drip like diamond, shine like gold. If you didn't know, baby, now you know. I'm a phenomenal black woman, top tier, unmatched. When I step in, the whole world reacts. Ain't no stopping, ain't no doubt. We've been that's word of mouth. I don't wait, I don't beg, I don't move for less. Been sitting first class, ain't no second guess. A black woman's grace, that's a force, that's a sign. A beauty so rare, it transcends time.
All right, all right. Brother Moomba, I'm not sure if it was supposed to stop there, but it did. Okay.
Many people wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. When I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, nominally. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes, the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say, it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palms of my hands, the need for my care, because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, all you women and me.
All right, all right. With that being said, welcome family to the latest edition, the latest class number 3 of Black Poli-Sci 101, and welcoming our special guest and presenter for today, Sister Inez Barron.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Thank you so much for joining us and providing this wonderful information for us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to have been asked to be a guest on your outstanding program, and I look forward to the exchange that we will be having today.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. And of course, I'm your co-host and moderator for this evening, Brother Lumumba Uncaged. And I have, of course, with me this evening the hostess with the most, Sister Empress Chase.
All right, all right. All right, family. Well, again, go ahead, Brother Moon.
One other aspect, I almost forgot to take care of the housekeeping real quick.
Oh,
so let me.
yeah, okay.
All right, and then I'll turn it right back over. Okay, with that being said, I just want to issue this fair use notice. Okay, so in accordance with Title 17 USC Section 107, the information being shared here is for educational, informational purposes only. All right, so fair use notice and warning. Okay, also, okay, disclaimer content, family, really quickly. All right, the views and opinions expressed in the media or comments on this channel are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by this channel's broadcaster. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. This channel owner claims no copyright to said content. The broadcast of this channel cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. The broadcast of this channel is a messenger and share of information and strive to verify, but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this channel. If you have a complaint about something or find your content is being used incorrectly, please contact the broadcaster prior to making a copyright claim. Any infringement was not done on purpose and will be rectified to all parties' satisfaction. Let me stop my screen share there and give thanks, much appreciated once again. And I just want to reintroduce Sister Inez Barron as well as Sister Empress Chase.
All right. Thank you again, Brother Lumumba. So, family, as Brother Lumumba indicated, this is our third session, and we're going to be continuing to build what we call now the Black Poli-Sci 101. And why are we doing this? Well, it's obvious that there's a lot of new kind of trickery. I mean, it's been ongoing, since the time of the conception of this whole stuff. But what we're seeing now is some real interesting stuff. And so we figure rather than to keep complaining about it or talking about it or whatever, we need to do more about it and in a way that's going to benefit us. And with the intent of there being sustainability, because it's not like we didn't make certain advancements or wasn't able to do certain things, but to keep it, now there's the real question and challenge. So what we've decided to do with MWM and some of our affiliates and allies, we're now being even more proactive, holistically speaking, than ever before, with the intention of not only community building, but nation building, making certain that the ideals of self-determination is no longer kind of pushed to the curb. And while we know that, folks are able to do various things with their 501s and all those kinds of things, we still have to make certain that there's a level of self-determination in the mix. Our ancestors already gave us instruction, already gave us a lot of insight, and some even gave us some plans of action and instructions. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, some dropped the ball. And we are now here to make sure we not only pick it up and kick it, but make certain that we reach the goals. So, with that said, our last sessions, of course, we had our brother with us, Brother Charles Barron, who just, I mean, brought us some incredible information and insight and helped us to further what we need to do in terms of growth and development from a political standpoint. Yep. That's right. Big ups to our brother Charles Barron. So now, because we deal with Ma'at as much as we can, which means there's a balance that we try to make sure that we're able to embrace. And with that said, we now have with us our sister Inez Barron, who, yes. Okay, and again, in her own right, has made incredible advancements when it comes to dealing with this system from a political standpoint, from an activist standpoint. And so we really want to make sure we did this tonight because a little later on, we're going to be talking more about warrior women, our Black/African diasporic warrior women and freedom fighters. That's going to be one of our new segments that we have in the very near future, and we wanted to do it today to kind of kick things off because today was one of our sisters' transition day. Her name is Sister Queen Warrior, and they also called her Sister Courage. Her name was Njeri Agani. Today, yeah. Yep. So today is her transition day. So what a way to remember her by connecting with a similar like spirit. And with that said, we're talking about our sister Inez Barron. I'm going to stop there and we get ready to turn the mic over to her when I just want to ask one thing, and that is, Mama Inez, Sister Inez, if you would just share with the family a little about you, just briefly, and then we're going to go right into the real nitty gritty here.
Thank you so much, Sister Empress. Once again, I'm honored to be on your program and to interact with you and your audience. Background information, I grew up in public housing development, lived there for the first 16 years of my life. My parents were very much aware of the value of education. So I've entitled my talk tonight, Education for Black Liberation. I grew up in a household where my mom, through whatever abilities she had, accepted and realized her blackness. She was as black as I am, and she embraced it and told us as her children that we needed to be proud because we were from Africa. How she got this knowledge, I don't know, but it was embedded in her. Her father before her was as black as she was and also had that sense of pride in blackness. We were very much involved in our church, and the church was, in fact, the first AME, A standing for African, First African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Brooklyn, New York. And so much of what was instilled in me and so many of the skills that I was able to develop was because our attendance at that church incorporated an opportunity for young children and teens to be involved, to have a platform, to learn how to be engaged in doing research and public speaking and sharing ideas and taking those leadership roles as children who were under the tutelage of other older people in the church. Certainly, most public schools were not affording those kinds of opportunities to Black children in particular. So much of what I gained in terms of my education outside of the structured classroom was in part because of the church and also because of the mutual aid Black organizations that my mom had me enrolled in, namely the tents, the J.R. Giddings and Jolliffe Union. Those kinds of Black cultural institutions were a part of my upbringing and gave me an opportunity to interact with other Blacks, to see Black women and Black men in positions of authority and importance, and transmit that to me as a young person, that this is what our culture and our heritage provides for us. So I was able to attend college because at the time that I was graduating from high school, City University of New York was free. There was no tuition. If you maintained a B or better average in high school, you were entitled to go to a city college free of charge. You did have to pay for your books, and that was a challenge. Although both my parents worked, it was a struggle and had to get to school. So that challenge of transportation was also one that I had to bear. So we didn't pay tuition, but all those other costs were involved in that. I was able to graduate from the City University system from Hunter College with a bachelor's degree, and I had a bachelor's in science, but got into the education field. My mom always told me I should be a teacher. I should be a teacher. And I was a little pushback on that. Sometimes you get that little resistance, what your parents are recommending for you. But in fact, teaching is my gift. I did teach for 36 years. I had a career of 36 years with the New York City Board of Education, 18 years in the classroom as a classroom teacher, and 18 years in other various administrative and supervisory positions. And I did retire as a principal of an elementary school. Following that, I followed my husband into the political arena, and I served in the New York State Assembly for 5 years. And then following that, I came into the New York City Council and served there for 8 years. So I've had a rich career in terms of what I've been able to be exposed to. And my history in the struggle goes back to when I was 15 years old. And my good friend grabbed me by the hand and said, "Come on, we're going to a demonstration." I said, "Okay, why are we demonstrating?" She said, "It's because of the situation in the South, and we in the North have to be supportive of that. So we're going to go demonstrate against Woolworths." So I've been involved in the movement since I was 15, and God bless me, I've now reached the age of 80 and still involved and still committed.
Ah, Shay.
I need to let you know, as you've referenced, my husband is none other than Charles Barron. And he's been such an inspiration, particularly in the political arena, of what it is to stand up and to be unafraid, to be unapologetic, to be bold, to be outspoken, and to fight on behalf of our people and to bring the resources to the community that we are entitled to.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. And listen, it's amazing. I mean, to feel and hear the energy, of our sister Inez. I mean, it's just so inspiring because, I talk with people often on a day-to-day basis, and unfortunately, I get a lot of stories about, how tired folks are and all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, ooh, and I'm talking about folks that's like 40 and maybe 50 or even younger. And I'm like, this is not good. So it is wonderful to have these examples. So listen, so let's move on. And family, do you notice how we wear so many different hats? And I mean, and this is part of our tradition. I mean, what Sister Anya just shared with us, I mean, that was like 5 different hats right there, minimally. So the point is that, and lastly, consistency. Oh my gosh, what has happened to our people when it comes to consistency? This is a major problem, y'all. So what we're doing now is not only setting the tone, but bringing you some examples and also information and hopefully mobilization to take folk to the next level from just conversation, which is wonderful, but we got to now deal with some real action. And so both Brother Charles and Sister Inez Barron have shown us action, not just talk, action. And that's what we're now looking to do. We're talking about reparations, a lot of folk, but what's going to be the modalities, the modes of operations that's going to make some stuff actually happen in our lifetime, by the way. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn it over to our sister Inez, and we're going to talk about education for Black liberation. Sister Inez, you got it.
Thank you so much. Well, of course, the first educator is the mother, the family. That's the first educator for all of us who come into this world. And it's an education that is, in fact, informal, but there's certain expectations and certain beliefs that we understand a mother will transmit to her child. And one of the most important things that any mother can give to their child is a degree of developing that child's self confidence. That's so critical. The academics, the literary, all of that are important, but they will come later. But laid on a foundation of self pride, self confidence, and the ability to know that they have worth as a person and that they are valued is the foundation for all that will come after that. So the first mother is, of course, that nurturer, the mother. The first teacher is that mother who's the nurturer and brings all of that to the child, builds their confidence, exposes them to that, to the larger environment, namely the family and then the community and other organizations, and builds in that child the ability to develop a confidence that encourages their language. As we look at the formal education system, we know that it is the system of the oppressor. It is not designed for Black people. It does not acknowledge our modalities and our easy ways of learning. It's very structured, it's very rigid, and it was designed, in fact, to accommodate the corporate world, to accommodate the agricultural world, not designed for the benefit of a child, not acknowledging a child's developmental stages that they go through, but making it so that the businesses will get the benefit of having the worker there by providing education for the child in a setting that will push through the truths, the lies, the distortion of what their history is and what their expectations. All of that is a mishmash. There's a book that talks about the myths that you learn in school. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and uh, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Those kinds of myths still exist today, are still being taught. And even now, with more of a rage than was previously. Before we were able to combat that and talk about other kinds of issues. But with this new administration, it's becoming criminal to even include it in the curriculum. So how are we going to address that? How are we going to make sure that our children get exposed to that? Again, as adults, as the aunties and uncles, as those who are in organizations that have a history and have knowledge of what it is that we have done and come through, we've got to have those alternative settings. We've got to have those Saturday schools. We have to have those after school programs that expose our greatness to our children. When I say our greatness, I'm not starting with the Museum of African American History in Washington. Starts with slavery. There's a little exhibit on the lower level, a small room about the size of my living room, which has some of the instruments of enslavement there. And then they come out into another exhibit, and the water and the threshing and the washing away, and we get to the existence in America. I'm talking about going back to our African roots. I'm talking about going back and talking about those great empires of Africa that I never learned about in a classroom until after I had graduated and after we had had that struggle to talk about Black studies, and it became a part of the college curriculum. Then I had the ability to go back and learn about it. I had the ability also to hear the greats, Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Ben, who were part of the structure that we provided through the African People's Christian Organization. We had lectures. They were the giants and the geniuses who came and shared their information with the community. So we've got to have those kinds of forums, got to have those kinds of settings that allow our people to hear from the greats. And when I talk about greats, these are the persons who are often self-educated, as Dr. John Henry Clark was. He did not go to that formal setting in colleges and get his education there. He was largely self-taught and did extensive research to document what it was that he shared with us. So as we talk again about education for Black liberation, we've got to consider the source. What is the source that we're looking at? If you're limited to a textbook written by the other folks and the oppressor and those other systems that seek to perpetuate capitalism, you've got a very narrow, distorted, white-dominated, Eurocentric source. And that certainly is not the expanse of what it is that we know our people have been able to encourage us and demonstrate for us our greatness. So we've got to go back to our African roots, go back to the source, go back to the origins of philosophy, go back to the geniuses of math who were able to build the Great Pyramids and other architectural structures. You certainly had to know pi is 3.14. You had to know all of those dimensions if you were going to build structures that have lasted these thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And remember, the Greeks came to African universities, and it was there that they gained the knowledge of philosophy, of science, of math, and took it back to Greece and to Rome. So we've got to have it known that Africa is the source. Africa, the continent of Africa, with the various cultures that are there and the various cultures and the languages and the people in each of their regions of Africa are the source. And they were the ability to civilize the entire world, although that attribute is not given to us as the African people. But we've got to start with going back and researching our African roots. So I would recommend that those people who are interested go back and get those sources, go get to those Black sources, and talk about, read about, discuss, and bring that to the fore about what is the basis, what was it that was in our DNA and in our culture and in our training. And remember, as they raided Africa and as they kidnapped us and brought us here, they brought the best. They brought the strongest. They brought those that were capable of helping this country, building this country, making this country by applying the skills that they had. So I do want to encourage people to start with that basis, looking at our African roots, our African civilizations, and all of the work that we did and how we traveled outside of Africa prior to being kidnapped and stolen and brought here. We traveled across all of the world in so many instances to be able to share our knowledge and to interact with other cultures. So I would like to start that as where we are and encourage people to do that research. And it is vast, and it's still much of it that has not been discovered or shared. And if people have an opportunity to take trips with those established veteran Black historians, I would encourage you to do that. Charles and I were able to travel to Kemet and to Ethiopia and Egypt, and we had a fantastic experience. And it was a tour where we were able to see all of that, all of those establishments, and then have discussion from the historians in the evening about what we had seen and the significance. So we want to make sure that as we talk about education for liberation, we're making the connection with Africa. It's a Pan-Africanist attempt that we've got to recognize, and embrace, because our liberation, as we're fighting and struggling and working to get our liberation, because we ain't free yet, as we're fighting for that, it has to be tied to our brothers and sisters in Africa to make it unified. One God, one aim, one destiny, as Marcus Messiah Garvey said. One of the great organizers in terms of Pan-Africanism, organized over 6 million people worldwide to understand that we've got to fight for our liberation. And he gave us a model of some of the things that we can do. He said he had traveled across the world, and in each of the instances where he traveled, the Black man was at the bottom. He was oppressed. He had the most meaningless jobs in terms of being awarded with salary of any significance. And he said he came to the United States and he said, where's the Black man's army? Where are the men of big affairs? He was inspired by Booker T. Washington. And he came and he says, well, I'm going to build it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring my people together, but I'm going to take the lead and make it happen. And of course, we know he established the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, and African Communities League. And it was concrete. It was concrete. We had doll factories. We had clothing factories. He had, of course, the Black Star Line. That was a highlight of what it was that he was working for. He had the nurses unit. We had doll units, dolls, and all kinds of businesses, restaurants, schools, hotels, all of that he inspired people. He provided that impetus to say, we can do this. And people got on board. They understood his commitment, his sincerity, and they got on board. Now, of course, anytime a Black person confronts this system, calls it out, highlights the injustices, and speaks unabashedly, unashamedly on behalf of fighting against that for our people, that person becomes a threat to highlighting what this system is in terms of its hypocrisy. And when that person becomes a threat, that person becomes a target. Talk about the Black Panther Party. They became a threat. They highlighted how this country, was not providing, and they said, we will do it. So they had a breakfast program, which shamed the country so that they had to scurry years later to try to get a breakfast program, which the Black Panther Party had done of their own volition. So when you challenge a system, you become a threat. And when you become a threat, you become a target. Target your character to assassinate you by making up lies. They oftentimes bring charges. They oftentimes imprison you. And yes, oftentimes you are killed by the system that does not want you to be that organizing force, bringing people's consciousness to another level and having them to understand that there are opportunities for us to come together and make change and do things. They don't want that, and they crush it wherever they can. And we know about COINTELPRO with the Black Panther Party, how they infiltrated the organizations, how they caused division, how they planted lies, and how they sent memos that they had concocted, and how they had us at each other. And of course, it came to the detriment of the party's effectiveness and how they were able to function. But nonetheless, we have people who are bold. We have people who will stand up. We have people who will help raise our consciousness and talk about the struggle for liberation, have us educating ourselves, having us come together and being analytical and critical of what it is that we see. So a part of what we've got to do also is to take on the responsibility of educating ourselves with a critical understanding. We've got to not go for the sound bites that you're going to hear from corporate media, not go for the headlines that are plastered all over, and to dissociate ourselves from that white domination that tells us that we are less than, that tells us that we don't have a history, that tells us that we are incapable of so many of the things that we are already done, that we've already done, and that oftentimes they have stolen and attributed to them. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us. We've got some interesting times ahead, but we've got people that are in the leadership, hopefully leading our people. Now, if everybody in leadership were for the benefit of our people, we'd be so much further ahead. But there is a group of misleadership, a group of misleaders, a group of people who are sycophants, who are sucking up to the establishment for their own personal gains, who are making deals for the benefit of that individual person and for their moving up and for their getting to sit in a room with whatever the name of the person is, to take a photo and skin and grin, to shake hands, to be at the table but not make a demand, to be at the table, be in the room, but be silent, to be in the room and just be a yazza, and shaking the head, not offering any kind of criticism, not demanding for our people what it is that they should be getting. So as we talk about education for Black liberation, we've got to make sure that we look to those leaders that we will support as they are models of integrity, models of commitment, models of being informed and standing up and calling out the injustices that they see. How do we do that? Well, we look at their history. We look at their accomplishments. We look at how they talk in the back room and in the community and at the board, at the legislative meetings. Is that the same all the time? And where there's a disconnect, our ears need to be pricked and go up and say, wait a minute, that's not what they said when they were with us. Looking for that consistency, looking for those leaders whose lives demonstrate their integrity and their boldness and their unequivocating, trying to be here and be there at the same time, straddling the line, trying to keep a balance for what they're saying with our people and what they're saying to, no, that's not how it is. We've got to have support for leaders who are fighting on behalf of our gaining our liberation. And as our general public and people in our community are being influenced by what they say, it's difficult to make sure that the consciousness level gets an opportunity to be addressed. So we hear about 250 years of independence and freedom, not for us, but yet people have oftentimes bought into that condition, that mind thought, that red, white, and blue, the flag, the rah-rah, the fireworks, without examining, well, wait a minute, where were we in 1776? What were we doing? How were we benefiting from this so-called Declaration of Independence? And it talks about the fact that it does not specifically talk about race, talk about Blacks, talk about slaves, not specifically, but a part of the complaint that the Declaration of Independence reveals was that they had a grievance against Britain because they were stirring up the natives being Native Americans and being those who were enslaved. So that reference is made there. So why would we want to rah-rah a country that from its inception denied us an opportunity and the benefits and the rights that it said were due to all men, women too, all men, all people. They said it was for all, but not for Blacks. So Malcolm X talks about that as hypocrisy, talking about freedom for all of us and the hypocrisy of that, because it was not for all of us. He talks about the hypocrisy. So as we talk about education for liberation, for Black liberation, we've got to look at it with that critical eye of our heritage and our ancestors. And we know that also Dr. Martin Luther King said, I like this quote, "The American system does not work for the masses of our people." And I'm giving you a quote, "and it cannot be made to work without radical, fundamental change." I'm going to say it again. American system does not work for the masses of our people, and it cannot be made to work without radical, fundamental change. So as we talk about fighting for our liberation and educating our people, part of what we have to get them to understand is to raise their consciousness about the contradictions of what this country says are the rights of all, and yet instill in reality that's not happening. As we talk about the fact that at the conclusion of the signing of the Declaration, there were lynchings that were proliferating this country. Ida B. Wells talks about that and demonstrates that, talking about the murders, talking about the destruction of Black towns that were governed by Black people. We know some of them are very familiar to us, but there are others that people may not know. And so I have a list of them, if I can put my hands on it, that talks about all of the communities that following so-called liberation were run by Blacks, governed by Blacks, had all kinds of businesses. We know Wilmington, North Carolina. We know Africa Town in Alabama. We have Seneca Village and Weeksville Village right here in New York, and the Oscarville in South Carolina. All of these are examples of communities that were governed by Blacks and were successful and had businesses and movie theaters and schools and banks and hotels and restaurants, to the point that the oppressive white communities were jealous, and under the least pretext of any kind of crime, used it as an opportunity to destroy, to obliterate, to wipe out those communities, whether it be by weapons, guns, fire, or bombs. And yes, I said bombs, because bombs were dropped on these Black communities to make sure that the essence and the substance of what they had built would be destroyed. So those were examples of what we had, and we've got to go back and look at that. How did they come about? They came about because we were not allowed to be a part of their community. So, hey, we'll build our own. We'll make our own. And they did that successfully. And it was a point of envy for other groups. And they wanted what we had. And they oftentimes stole those deeds, forced the people out, and wiped them out in terms of their presence in that community. It happened in Seneca Village, where by eminent domain, the state of New York forced out those Blacks who were living there. They had homes, they had schools, they had churches, they had stores, and it was wiped out. They were forced to leave, and it was settled first by the AME Zion Church again, African American Episcopal Zion Church, was settled in the Seneca Village, which is now a part of the illustrious Central Park of New York, one of the major attractions. But they took it. They took that land and did not compensate the people adequately. The people didn't want to leave. They didn't facilitate them finding another location. They just force them out with so-called making improvements for the public good. But unfortunately, that those communities were wiped out. Weeksville is still have some remnants of what happened. Weeksville was another village in New York, in Brooklyn actually, where they also had their own homes, beautiful homes, and the city wanted to destroy that as well for development, housing development, economic development. And there was a sister by the name of Joan Maynard who was part of the leadership for fighting to keep those homes standing. And she was successful with those who worked with her. And those homes have been restored. There are 2 homes that have been restored. So there is still that remnant that we can go to see. It happened because Black people understood that this was important. So the orphanage that was adjoining that community, unfortunately, was destroyed. The school that the Weeksville community had, unfortunately, was destroyed. But we do have the 2 homes that are there, and it has been new construction of a cultural center there that's a museum, which highlights some of that. So we've got to make sure that our children and our young people and the adults that are here understand the greatness and the contributions and the successes of what we can look at and what can be attested. As we talk again about education, this is an education that is, for the most part, not in textbooks and not a part of the curriculum. And as it was a part of the curriculum, it's being obliterated. We have got to empower ourselves and educate ourselves by going to those scholars and those persons who are in the leadership, ask them, check their work out, and find out what it is that we can do to gain power. So what do I mean by power? So I've got some quotes by some folks. One of them is from Charles Barron, just to highlight, to summarize what it is that he has shared with us. Power is the control of the political and economic institutions in the Black community, be it land, controlling the means of production, and controlling the cultural and social institutions in our community. That means all of the things, our schools, the public safety issues, the social conditions that we have, the hospitals, all of that are part of what we have to control as we exercise power. And we're pleased to say that as a part of the work that we have done in our community, we have relied on a group of people in various organizations who are committed to having it work. And one of those organizations is Operation Power, Power being an acronym for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect. And that's the grassroots organization right here in our community. Just lay people, people who are homemakers, people who are just laborers in the system, who are working, but understand that we need to have the resources brought to our community that will help our community grow. We also had support from December 12th movement, and we also had support from CMOTAP, people who came, who volunteered. That's a lot of what we don't have today. Back in the 60s, people were volunteering, people were sacrificing, people were giving of their skills and their resources so that our communities could be improved. But Operation Power was one of the main organizations. We had originally, it was an outgrowth of a movement that we had to fight the system, which wanted to bring in an environmentally hazardous wood burning incinerator to generate electricity to sell to Con Ed. And we said, no, we're not having that. And we had a coalition that came together of various organizations and block associations to fight that power. And we were successful. People had said, you're not going to win, can't fight City Hall, it's a done deal. None of that penetrated us to have us think that we could not and would not be successful, and we were successful. So it's organizations like Operation Power, December 12th, CEMOTAP, and others that work with us to do the grunt work and backed us up so that we can continue to be bold and continue to make demands. And during the time that we were in those positions, to look to have 3 brand new schools built from the ground up, fully equipped science labs, a fully equipped science lab, library, a swimming pool, a stadium, a gymnasium with stadium seats, an art lab where they have the fire and kill for the things that the children have made, a music studio with 5 training rooms on the side, 5 music study rooms on the side. It's a beautiful facility, and it's for our children because our community is not gentrified. And the reason it's not gentrified is because we knew after doing a power analysis that it was the city council that would make the final determination as to whether or not a project would go forward. So each time a developer wanted to bring a project into our community, they would have to meet with the city council member. And since 2001, it was Charles, and then following him, it was me, and then it was him again. So for those periods of years, we did not approve any project. We have never approved any project that did not meet the needs and the income level of the people who presently live in our community. So we don't use the word affordable because anybody can hide behind that. We define that as affordable to the income levels of the people who presently live there. So we're pleased to say that in the 42nd Council District, there is no gentrification and that the Black population has seen an increase over the time that it has been functioning in our community. So we understand that we have that power. We talk about Marcus Garvey. He to me is the epitome of talking about and bringing about and bringing to fruition those models of what it is that you can offer your people and the pride. He was, example of self-pride, pride in being Black, pride in being from Africa, having those African roots and talking about that kind of, and there are others, but for him to do what he did in that period of time without social media to bring together 6 million people worldwide, and I think he had 40 or 50 different chapters across the world, that was significant. And he built for himself the ability to project to the world, to Black people in the world, that we have a greatness in us and that we can do all of those great things. And of course, as I said, he was a threat and he was targeted. And they created this charge against him for mail fraud. And Charles often talks about today when your venture capitalists offer you an opportunity to invest in something for the future, it's fine. There's no fraud in that. There's no crime in that. But they oftentimes criminalize any of the expressions that we bring to be able to try to destroy the integrity and the influence of people that are following that. They criminalize people with the pig laws, as enslaved were brought out and no longer were working on plantations. They criminalize the theft of a pig, killing of a pig. You killed it because you were going to eat it. And they use that as a basis for putting people into prison, getting them into the system of convict leasing and being bound to a larger corporation. So when they say that slavery ended, which it did not end, but when they say that they simply shifted it to the criminalization of the acts of our people and putting them into the prison system, which replaced the plantation system because it was free labor. Slavery shall be abolished except as a punishment for crime. So they made those crimes and put our people into prisons, put them on chain gangs. Again, free labor, uncompensated labor. And even today that exists. Those who are in the incarcerated work for pennies, literally pennies. There is no minimum wage for the work that they're doing. And it's work that they're doing is significant. And it is work for large corporations in many instances. So we've got to look at that as well. Also, just want to make sure people know that it was Marcus Garvey who gave us the phrase, one God, one aim, one destiny, gave us the flag, the red, black, and green flag, red for the blood, black for the people, green for the land. And he talked about, he said, look for me in the world when I'm coming back. I'm coming back and I'm going to bring thousands upon thousands of our African ancestors so that we will fight for our liberty, to continue that fight for our. I also want to talk about other people who talk about power. Those who say that power is the great equalizer. That's a phrase that Charles uses often. And Omali Yeshitela says it's not about the racism, because if you keep the same system and just put blacks in those same seats of power with no kinds of change to the system that's operating, we're still going to have oppression. It's just that now black folks are doing it to themselves. So we've got to make sure that we understand it's beyond so-called racism. And I have a quote from Neely Fuller, who says that until you understand white supremacy and racism, everything you think you understand will only confuse you. So you understand white supremacy and racism, everything you think you understand will confuse you. But once again, it's beyond racism. It's moving past allowing blacks to do the same thing that whites have done to us, to looking at the system and looking again, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, it's got to be radically changed. So the things that we're doing now as we move on the spectrum towards fighting for our liberation and our freedom have got to be radically changed. We're doing things now in ways that are reformist and moving from the entrenched hardline positions to something that's reformist, but we want to move past that. The objective is not to take this capitalist system, which is an oppressive system. It always requires someone to be on the bottom and working for the corporations for unfair wages. It's beyond that. So we've got to make those steps towards getting what it is that our people need, and doing it in a bold, uncompromising way. If the black elected officials who were in city council really understood their power and their responsibility to save the community for the blacks who were living there and not have them displaced, they would not approve those projects that displace people, because the people living in the community would not be able to afford the required income as those new developments are coming up. So they either don't understand their real power, or they're looking to move up the ladder by ingratiating themselves to these housing developments for the harm of our people and for the displacement of our people. And we've got to make sure that we fight against that. And in terms of the history of our people and the struggle, it's important that we appreciate so many people. And again, people are people, they have their shortcomings, there are no perfect people. But as we can find those things in their actions and in their achievements that are things to be emulated, we should do that. I believe we should do that. Highlight that and call it out. Where they have other personal flaws, perhaps, or shortcomings, that's the humanity in them. But where they have made sacrifices and struggles, and people like Muhammad Ali, who was bold and said, I'm not going in the war. I'm not going to fight your war. They never did anything to me. He had a simplicity and an intelligence about him that people could relate to. And he was willing to pay the price, and he did pay the price for those years that he was denied an opportunity to be in the boxing world. But he was willing to take that chance. Again, he was a threat, so he was targeted, and he lost many years of being able to fight. But he came out victorious and really elevated himself in the minds of those of us who understand what it was that he was fighting for and what he did. And just to give a little, Empress had spoken a little earlier about women. So we have to talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, because that sister was bold. She said, no, I didn't come all this way just for no 2 seats, and fought against SNCC, which was willing to push women into a secondary position and not allow them to advance themselves. She was vocal in that regard and came back and said, listen, I'm going to work on this opportunity for our people to gain some financial independence by starting a pig bank. And I hadn't known about it until maybe 12, 15, 20 years ago. I had first learned about her pig bank, and that she had a cooperative. And that's the other important thing that we talk about, that she had a cooperative which would give you 2 pigs, and those pigs would have offspring. You could keep the offspring, and the pigs got transferred around to others in the collective, so that you now had a food source, as well as the ability to have those pigs sold also, the ones that you were not using for your own food source. She also had housing that she provided for the cooperative. Once again, when you're a threat, you're a target. And the government targeted her, and she did not have the ability to withstand that. And that collective was not able to withstand what it was that they were attacking her with. So, of course, we have to always talk about Harriet Tubman. Harriet, what do you mean you're leaving? You know, you have a condition where you are liable to fall asleep at any moment, and you don't have any map. You don't know where you're going. She said, no, there's an underground railroad, and I've been told that it exists, and I'm going to risk my life to fight for my freedom and take others with me. Not just me alone, but take others with me. And we know she made several trips. That kind of sacrifice and putting your life at risk, not knowing what was around any corner or tree or around the bend, not knowing what you would encounter on any of the numerous trips that she made. But she told people, you're going to go on. Dead men tell no lies. You are going to be free, or you're going to stay here and not be breathing. And people understood that she was serious about what she was saying. And she inspired them and made them have a sense of their own wealth. And she was successful. And she was also a spy for the army and helped to free hundreds. I think it was 700 soldiers that she led in battle. And she helped to free 700 of those who were enslaved and led them to freedom. So, Empress, you have questions for me, or you want to
All right. Well, I just have one, and then I'm going to open up the floor for folk. And well, actually, I have a couple. Two. One I mean, we've been examining over the past few years the necessity of there being independent education in our communities to a greater degree. And so, Sister Inez, you mentioned, of course, after school programs and things of that nature. But in this day and age, obviously, with the bombardment of all this other negative stuff that our children are now, having to be confronted with and so forth, a lot of these programs are not adequate. And particularly, many of them, particularly here in Philadelphia, definitely are not African centered or not Black perspective. So they're kind of like, babysitting or whatever. But they're not really providing our children real, thought processes of development and so forth. With that said, what are your thoughts about the now, shall we say, more aggressive approach or aggressive reality in establishing in our communities nationwide more independent types of educational apparatuses?
I think it's critical. I think it's critical that we do that. And it was very much a part of what we experienced in the 1970s and 1980s when organizations established Black independent educational systems for our children. In Brooklyn, we had Uhuru Sasa, which we call the East, which did that. And in 1980, the House of the Lord Church, of which Charles and I are members here in Brooklyn, we established the House of the Lord Church Elementary School. And I was the chair of that committee that established that. And we had, and the part of the beauty of the independent schools is that they don't use that European model of education and instruction where children are expected to sit in their seats and be at their desk and be in rows, but it understands that the Black child in particular uses all of their modalities and their bodies and their songs and touching to be able to tactile sense, to be able to embrace and hold the concepts that we're trying to teach them. It's child-centered, it's Afro-centered, and it was very effective. So the challenge came with the finances. The challenge came with offering these very unique experiences at nominal costs and not having the financial ability to pay the staff and maintain the facilities where these schools were located, the heating bill, the mortgage payments, the rental fees, all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
there are still those opportunities. And one in particular is called Little Sun People here in Brooklyn. And it's an institution that is more than 40 years old. Perhaps it's about 50 years old. And it's still standing. And it started because one person, Mama Fela Barker, wasn't pleased with what was available for her own child at the age of 2 and 3. So she said, I'll do my own school. And it's the people who have that kind of wherewithal, that commitment, that strength, that self-belief that we have to call upon. And it's also sacrificial. I get back to that sacrificial. I think that in this day and age, there's not the same level of sacrifice. And it is a real sacrifice to be able to commit the time that it takes to be able to provide what it is that our communities are entitled to. But it's been 50 years or just about 50 years. If it's not, it's 49. And it is an outstanding program. It's Afrocentric. You walk in and Africa is all over the walls and in the diagrams and in the books and in the literature and in the music. And there's an African drummer, there's African drumming class, there's dancing, there's music, and there's also violin. Remember, Noel Pointer played the violin. So it's cultural, it's academic, it's instructional, and it now is a part of the offering through the Board of Education for after school programs. So we've got to, I think, be able to formulate, develop, and sustain those kinds of programs, and then do the paperwork, do the processing. And it is quite extensive. It's not an easy task to do. It's quite extensive to meet the challenges and the hurdles that they present for you to be able to qualify to be an after school site. But it can be done. It can be done. And the students there are phenomenal. They know who they are. They have stage presence. They have knowledge of our heroes and heroines and can talk to you about them. And it's just a beautiful site. So I would encourage people to find out what it takes, what are the requirements for your program to be qualified and certified as a program, because our children are, for the most part, in the public school system. Of course, there are some charter schools that are offering also those kinds of integrated, no, I shouldn't say integrated, I want to use that word, inculcated and inclusive information about what it is that our history has been, that are also around and available.
Okay, so thank you for that, my sister. So here's what we found in the past 10 years, because we've been kind of like evaluating where did we go wrong. And you hit it right on the nose with one of the key areas was, of course, the lack of revenue, the lack of finance. But what we also now know is that, particularly when it comes to Black women, that the monies that our sisters are spending on hair and nails and other stuff. See, I have to now look at this stuff and bring it the way it really is. And I get that, certain things are, not easy to do. I get that. But something's not gelling. And so we got to look at this and say, what are the real priorities?
Exactly.
And you know what I'm saying? And so here's the other thing, Sister Inez. So here's the thing. So now in the past 20 years, right, we have almost doubled the number of educators, Black educators, in terms of bachelor's, master's, PhDs, special ed, and all of that. So the reality is, with all of that going on in our communities nationwide, there's little to no real efforts to really establish independent kinds of institutions. So not just necessarily a day-to-day school, but even with what you're saying, something, see, I don't like the weekend stuff. I'm in Philly. That stuff do not work. I can tell you right now, it don't work. Not here. But going back to, I went to DC to kind of do some observing there, and I got a chance to meet Baba there, Baba Zulu for the Ujima school, which is 50 years. See, and I'm like, wait a minute. How does this stay in place for 50 freaking years? You see, so people can't tell me you can't, or something has gone awry. So lastly, so now what we're doing is kind of challenging some of our educators, because as you said, Sister Inez, we used to, maybe our people understood the necessity of volunteering. And of course, for me, the 501 plague knocked a lot of that out. Right. And again, I don't say don't do that, but like you have two hands, you do that on that hand and then do the independent thing on the other hand. Right. But they lost their concept or wanting to do that. So now what we're challenging for Philly is for educators who claim to be about Black stuff. Will you give us an hour of your time? You see, we are smart enough and ready enough to look at this thing realistically in such a way that we can do what they did in the Godfather movie, for lack of a better example, and that is, we're going to make you an offer you can't refuse. You see, how can you say you can't give us a freaking hour of your time? You see?
I think that's an excellent idea. It's limited, it's doable.
Yes. And then that way create the collective independent collective education apparatus. You see, but what again, lastly, we learned is if we don't introduce this stuff to folks and put it in their face and let them know that we're watching and taking notes for real and we'll report this stuff back to our people, unless you are able to have that kind of tenacity or whatever, they act like they don't understand what you're talking about, at least in Philly. You see, so I just wanted to put that little sidebar in, and I'm going to yield and go back to Brother Lumumba and see if there's anyone on in the backstage or anyone from Facebook or what have you that has a comment or a question.
All right. Excellent. And thank you, ladies, for that beautiful discourse. With that being said, let me open up the floor, family, for any questions or comments that you all may have. We have Sister J. Renee as well as Sister Dorothy that is with us in the yard. All right. So if any one of you had any questions, comments, you can open your mics up and ask your question or comment or state your comment. Also, shout out to Brother Pollinator, all right, that's joining us on our our YouTube live, as well as our sister Shirley Baker, one of our longtime supporters as well, joining us on our YouTube live. All right, Sister Dottie, any questions or comments with anything that you heard thus far? Okay, not hearing anything there. Let me come over to Sister J. Renee. Any questions or comments with anything that you have heard thus far? Okay.
Question.
Oh, there we go.
Greetings, everybody.
Greetings.
I hope everybody's doing well. I am loving. Thank you, brother. Thank you. I'm loving this bill. Respect to everybody in the house. It's been amazing to just listen and be inspired by the words and just to envision myself in some of the things that you said. One of the questions I had is, consistency, perseverance, and things like that is very important in this work that we're doing. And I know it has to be inside of your heart to push forward, but what are some things that has helped you pass your passion to keep going in times that might have been hard, or you might want to stop or delay, if that time has ever came?
For me, it has not come. I hope it does not come. And I have to credit my parents. It has to go back to my parents. My mom and my dad were hardworking people. They knew the value of a penny. My mom had a dream that she wanted to own her own house, wanted to move out of public housing. So there were nights often when dinner was salt pork with syrup, or dinner was biscuits with syrup, and she'd make it a big thing. Oh, we're having biscuits with syrup tonight, and that's what we had. Or Navy, that's what we had, and that was over many nights, over many nights. And she always made us appreciative of the fact that we had something to eat, and spruced it up, made it exciting. My mom was a special person. She also had that education gift. She would read a story to us. She would read the Gingerbread Boy, whatever, or the Aesop's Fables, and then we would act it out. Or she would get in the kitchen and then, now we're going to make the gingerbread cookies, so make sure you guard the door. Talk about interactive and my mom was no nonsense. and very much outspoken, very much challenging the system. She represented herself pro se in a case that she brought against the Board of Education, because she was an employee with the Board of Education, and she won her case pro se. My mom, so that's a part of, my mom stood up for me anytime that I said something had happened and she said, well, what happened? She would always tell me, okay, let's go to school, pay attention to the teacher, come home. What happened? Mommy, I think the teacher's prejudiced. She said, what? This was 1950, probably 57 or 58. I said, yeah, I think the teacher's prejudiced. Why do you say that? Because when I raise my hand, she doesn't call on me. And today when I raised my hand, she told me, put your hand down. Oh boy. She should never have done that. Next morning, Margaret Smith was in that school. And my mom, she was tempered, but she made it very clear that her daughter was as smart as any other child in this so-called gifted class. Teacher said, oh no, she doesn't have the grades to compare with the others in the class. My mother said, oh really? Get your book. So she went and got her record book. This woman was so blinded by her own prejudice that the grades from tests that she herself entered in her own book, which reflected that my 80s were as good as everybody else's 80s, that I never failed a test. Her own handwriting in her own book that were her own record showed that I was comparable. She said, well, her notebook is not up to par. Now, when I went to school, the loose leaf was, the highest point. You had your loose leaf. It was organized by subjects. So she called her star pupil, Martha. Martha, bring me your book. Martha, bring me your book. So she flipped the page. She says, here, show me the notes from this page. So I got my loose leaf and found the date, showed her that. Oh, so you have that one. Okay. She did that about 10 times, 15 times. And for each page, she wanted notes. I had notes. My mother said to the principal, if my daughter ever comes back home and tells me that the teacher did something that she felt was unjust, unfair, you all are going to have a problem in this school. So my mother was a fighter, not just for her children, but for other children and for what was the just thing to do. So that was my model. And my dad was he was the provider, and they were a team. When they went out that door, there was no division. They weren't having two different points of view. They were a team, and that's how they raised us to fight for what was right, say what you believe, and you don't give up. You don't give up. So that's the model that I had. And yes, if you wanted your nails done, you did them yourself. You were sacrificial. And I know that school that you referenced in Washington, D.C., because my three nieces and their mom and dad lived in Washington, and my three nieces are graduates of that school and that program. So, my brother and my sister and I, we were raised with that kind of consciousness and that kind of ability to be sacrificial for the bigger picture. It's not just about you. It's about what your skills and talents and abilities are that you can contribute to the larger family, to the community, to make sure that we get justice for our people. At 72, my mom marched from New York City to Albany to protest the budget cuts. So she didn't give up.
Wow. Wow.
She passed away.
That's amazing, right?
She always was that fighter. So that's what I grew up with. That's what I saw. That's what was modeled. And that's what was told to me was the expectation of what I needed to do. So that's what I have.
Wonderful. All right. Did that answer your question, Sister J?
It did. Thank you so much.
And by the way, Sister Inez, so Sister J is working with us to develop our National Black Women's History and Legacy Curriculum.
Great. That's excellent. Excellent.
Okay.
If you
All
send
right. And let's
an email, I can see what I can do to lend some support to that. I'd be glad to see how I can
Oh,
be.
wonderful. Wonderful. And that's what we're really talking about now, making sure that we establish these things that we need to have for ourselves, that we map it out and determine. For example, here in Philadelphia, we had an elder by the name of Dr. Ed Robinson. And he also was, interestingly enough, a deputy managing director or something like that. But he was a Pan-Africanist. In fact, he was the director of the what was known as PAFO, the Pan-African Federation Organization. But he was also a historian. He was a lawyer and an educator, a scholar. He and his brother wrote the book Journey of the Songhai People. You might have heard of it. At any rate, he developed an entire, yeah, he developed an entire curriculum for the public school system for Black history. And after he passed, they voted somewhere in there that they would utilize it, but it never happened. So these are some of the things that we've learned and have seen with our own eyes what this system does. And even though we know we have to continue to fight where our children are, at the same time, simultaneously, we've got to build our own.
Yes.
And we should be smart enough at this stage of the game to figure out how to finance it. Because again, millions of dollars are being spent for hair and nails and all this other stuff. So some of us can no longer accept that we can't educate our children ourselves.
That's true. And I mentioned the fact that the number of Black educators has changed. In New York, interestingly enough, we've had a decline in the number of Black teachers in the New York City Board of Education system.
Wow.
A significant decline in the number of Black teachers. And we had a similar instance about a curriculum being designed, but not implemented. We had a similar thing happen, Underground Railroad curriculum, but it was never implemented. But recently, the city council did give funds for a group of Black educators to come together, and they did design a curriculum which is now being gradually filtered into the school system in a limited way. It's being gradually filtered. So we do have that program that's being introduced to the schools.
You know, Sister Inez, and again, it is just very, very annoying at this stage of the game to have heard and seen people like Dr. Chauncey McIntyre, to hear and see Barbara Sizemore, who I saw when I was in college. I mean, to hear, you mentioned Dr. Francis Chris Wilson, Dr. Amos Wilson. These are people who taught us about certain things, and some of it was specifically about educating our children. Yes. So here we are 20, 30, 40 years later. Dr. Bobby Wright. I mean, come on. This is unbelievable and unacceptable that at this stage of the game, and by the way, they still have Roots charter. Well, they're not a charter school anymore in DC, but Roots is still there. But they had to succumb to the system, so they have a government program. But again, if our people were able to have their own schools, our own schools in our communities 100 years ago, right, and afterwards, this is unacceptable. We cannot, the excuses are just, it's no longer acceptable. Lastly, we're going to be approaching some of the churches, because these churches have buildings. I mean, why are we not utilizing, or at least attempting to utilize, some of the churches for our educational needs? So, that's a rhetorical question, kind of, but you get the point. We're not being as aggressive. Many of our own people that be talking all this stuff, we're not really doing the work now in being aggressive. You see. Oh, real quick, Sister Pam just contacted me a little while ago. Again, for folk who are in Philly or you come into Philly, the 24-hour Mumia marathon is on Monday. So what'll probably happen, Sister Inez, when we do our session next Monday, I'll probably be at City Hall because we're going to be there all night in order to bring attention to Brother Mumia. I'm taking my sleeping bag and working on getting a tent, and we plan to be at City Hall the entire night. So just a heads up, folk.
That's important that we make sure as we talk about educating our people, raising their consciousness and fight for Black liberation, that our political prisoners are
Yes.
that program and part of that emphasis and that push, that we don't let them be forgotten. Sacrifices that they have made, spending decades in years on trumped up charges, and particularly for Mumia, it's an international push. People across many countries understand that the circumstances that led to his conviction were often trumped up and not substantiated. And we've got to continue that fight to free Mumia and other political prisoners.
And by the way, on that note, just to show you again how there's some real problems with conscious educators in our community. For example, in France, there's a requirement for there to be classes on Mumia Abu-Jamal. This is France. Even though they've been acting strange lately, they did do that, right? But I'm just saying, in our own communities, what kinds of things are we really making certain that our children know about from a collective standpoint? So, again, it's a rhetorical question, but I just want to keep putting it out there because Sister Dottie stays on me all the time. She didn't come through. She's still on I see her there, but we've been talking about this for a couple of years. And now finally, one of our brothers here is allowing us to use his facility to at least begin the process of doing some independent educational things. So, big ups to Minister Ishmael.
Okay. And we do have a project, I agree, that we need to use more opportunities to engage our children in particular. But there is an annual event that Operation Power sponsors, and it's called Black Invention Parade. And we do have the parade, which highlights the inventions of many of the Black inventors who we were not familiar with until we did the research to find out, which is why, again, it's so important that you do your self-research. You do it for yourself to try to find out what it is. And it is a program, an event that we conduct in conjunction with the local school board, school community here. And we work with the teachers in the classroom, and there are students that do projects and highlight the accomplishments and inventions of Black inventors, and then they make a presentation. You have a parade where we go through the community, highlighting what it is that our children have discovered about the inventors, and we have huge placards, and we have big signs and banners. So it's quite an event. So that's one of the things that we do annually to try to get an involvement with the school system and our children and our culture and our history.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Brother Lumumba, that sounds like something that you might want to connect to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I definitely want to tap in and get more information on that for sure.
Great.
All right. Anyone else?
And just a heads up, we are 5 past the hour. So, just
okay.
On that. All right. So with that being said, I guess this is going to be our final question or comment for the evening.
Yes.
Before we get ready to close out. So let me open up the floor one more again and see if there's any final questions or comments.
All right.
Okay. Well, I just want to make a final comment myself, you know, as far as that note goes. And first and foremost, I want to say, um, black don't crack, okay? And you know, much, much to your credit, your melanin is popping, all right. And like they say, the blacker the berry, okay,
It is. Yes, it is.
okay, all right. And
Ashe.
I look at day over 59. Let's go. Doing something right. Doing something right. All right. Now with that said, I just lastly wanted to ask. I know you talked about Muhammad Ali, and
Mhm.
I believe, well, on that same vein, I'm not sure if you mentioned it or not, but I was also thinking about Malcolm X and their ability to make it plain and
That's
to
right.
connect directly with the people.
Definitely.
What is your opinion, your basis on that of how we can kind of utilize those type of strategies and techniques to incorporate into educational type of strategies to engage with the youth of today. Understanding that we have the advent of social media, so on and so forth.
Right. Certainly, again, another personality. We have his photograph, his painting of a brother who painted Malcolm X's portrait, and he is a significant figure. His autobiography is significant and impactful. When I was
Oh,
teaching,
my apologies, Sister Inez, but just be careful with your hand placement because any motion that you make around the microphone is going to pick up very
oh,
heavily.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
All right.
thank
All right.
you.
Thank you. Give
Uh,
thanks.
when I was teaching eighth grade, I had a student in my class who had lots of issues in the home, and he was going to be the agencies were going to come in and give another placement for him. And at that time, we used to order booklets from the Reader's Digest Club or whatever club, and they would have these small paperback books, and the children would get them at a discounted price. So he had ordered a book, and he didn't have the money to pay for it. So I said, "Oh, that's okay. You can take the book, Jamal." The book that he took was the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Mm.
I saw him, he saw me. I'm in the car, I stopped at a light, and he spotted me and he said, "Miss Barron, Miss Barron." And he gave me his name and I remembered him. He said that book changed his life. As a matter of fact, what he said was that book saved his life. Of
Mm.
course, he was in a very, unstable situation, but he related to the book. So we certainly have to find ways to have our children see examples of models in our history and in our culture that fought the system, was successful, and present a model for us for how we can not give up, not give in, be people of courage and integrity, and speak our minds, no matter what it is that the consequences are.
Indeed, indeed. I say much appreciated for that. With that being said, I think we're about to close out. So if we can have final thoughts and closing remarks.
Well, I'm so pleased to have been able to ask to participate and to share my thoughts. It's an ongoing process and it's never ending process as we talk about education for Black liberation. And we're discovering things all the time. And it's incumbent on those of us who have gifts and skills and talents to share that because there's a scripture that says, "To whom much is given, much is required." So I want to make sure that I do as much as I can in the way that I can to continue the struggle for our liberation.
I say. All right. Give thanks. Coming back over to you, Sister Empress.
All right. Well, no, Brother Moomba, I'm good. This was another wonderful and powerful session. I'm looking forward to part two.
Yes.
And going more into even some of the areas in terms of political education. What do
Yes.
we need to do to now become more politically astute? Because hey, in 2 years there's going to be a big election again. And even though, some of our people are not feeling it or not going to vote or do this or whatever, the fact still remains that we would be remiss if we did not at least try to present something in the form of a national Black political agenda.
Yes.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about that maybe next Monday, and other relevant things. Okay?
Okay. Look forward to it.
All right. Good. Thanks.
Thank
All
you.
right. Excellent. All right, family. With that being said, we're getting ready to close this session out. This has been another wonderful session of Poli-Sci 101, Black Poli-Sci 101, with our sister, the Queen, Miss Inez Barron. All right. With that being said, we're going to close out for this session. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, everyone was able to pick something up that they could take with them and be able to utilize in their lives and be able to share with others. With that being said, I want to give thanks first and foremost to the Most High Creator Creatress. Give thanks to the ancestors and the elders, those who have shed blood, sweat, and tears and paved the way to allow us to be here today. I want to thank Sister Inez for joining us this evening. Also, of course, the Sister Empress, hostess with the mostest. Those who tapped in with us on the StreamYard, Sister Dot, Sister J. Renee, those that tapped in with us on the YouTube Live and the Facebook Lives, those who will hear it presently and those who will hear it in the future. All right, thank you for your time, energy, and effort, dedication, determination, and discipline. I bid you all truth, justice, peace, love, freedom, power, prosperity, protection, patience, and divinely principled purpose. I want to say let us continue to strategize, organize, and mobilize. And finally, I want to say Pamoja Tuta Shenda, which means together we will win. All right.
All right. Brother Mumba, I forgot one quick thing, and that is for those who are interested at 9:30, we're going to do just a quick briefing for about 30 minutes, introduction for a powerful kind of series that's coming up that focuses on our warrior women and freedom fighting women, our sisters. And so we're getting ready to do a collective of that kind of mindset, that type of capability, courage, and so forth, so we can bring forward the kinds of spirit of Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer and others. We got to see that on a more day-to-day basis in our communities and on a national level. So 9:30, we'll do only a 30-minute session just to give you some insight, and then we will give you information about the next session. So if you haven't gotten that information, you can either email us at nationalmwm@aol.com. Again, nationalmwm@aol.com, or text 267-636-3802, and we'll send you the link.
All right. Outstanding. Thank you all once again. And I bid you peace, power, and prosperity. Until next time, family.